got a Sous Vide stick and we need to talk about it. Never expected I would open a video on my channel with that sentence, but let me explain. If you are involved in collecting old computers and the peripherals that come with them, you are also very much aware of their tendency to yellow, and that to counteract this yellowing you can do something known as retrobrighting, which involves using hydrogen peroxide. Well, a thing holding me back from retrobrighting is that I could never get good results on trying to retrobright my keyboard keys. I tried multiple things and found that a Ziploc bag filled with peroxide worked the best for me, but that was a process that took very long, so I wanted to see if I could find an easier way of doing it, preferably not involving long exposures to UV lights. Well, that made me remember that the process should also be possible without those, by warming up the hydrogen liquid to around 60 degrees Celsius. And that is where the Sous Vide stick comes in, because I want to see if this simple and cheap stick is a good way to keep my hydrogen warm and brighten up my keyboard keys. Well, this one gives perfect cooking results, as an IPX7 protection, a digital touchscreen and a convenient clamp. Is it me or is it a bit weird to write an IPX rating on something that is clearly meant to be submerged? Maybe they mean the control part. Interestingly, I had to look for a bit to find a keyboard that was yellowed and that I would dare experiment with. Preferably I would have used a generic PS2 keyboard, but none were on hand. So I wanted to choose from this Commodore 64C keyboard, which is slightly yellowed, and this very yellowed Tulip keyboard. Well, it didn't take long for me to decide to go with the Tulip, as it's much more yellow, and I have two of these. They came with my IBM PCs. Well, let's get going. I bought a new pen to try this with. Let's remove the keys from the keyboard. This keyboard has a rubber dome mechanism, but it's quite nice to type on. I found that doing it by hand was the safest. Keycaps can sometimes be brittle and break, so care is advised. The spacebar also came off quite easily. You just pull carefully on the center part, and then with a spatula push it out. Since the color of the spacebar rubber dome is different, I don't really need to separate it out, so I put them all in a bag. Now let's get the Sous Vide stick out of the box. The packaging isn't too interesting, and here is the Sous Vide stick. I also got a new pan to try it out with. It has labels for the amount of water that it can hold. And here I realize it will never work with this pan. Quick ride to the thrift store resulted me in this rather old but large pan that I filled with water, and again me winging it results in a red error light. The controls are quite easy to use, although there was a bit of a smudge on the interface. This button cycles between the temperature and time controls. Pressing the power button will start the water heating process. The manuals didn't contain any information on how to operate the device, so I didn't quite get why every time I pressed the button it would give an error. Then I realized that it has not only a label showing the maximum of water it can handle, but also the minimum of water it needs to operate. So I started to add some water until I reached the minimum needed, and then it successfully started heating up the water by creating a sort of current. The temperature rises pretty fast actually. A quick test to see if the temperatures lines up with my thermometer. Not too bad. So here are the keycaps and hydrogen peroxide I want to use. Every time I order a 5-liter jug, I feel like I'm being added to a government agency watch list. Well, things didn't go quite as planned, as I missed the moment I put the keys in the water. Yes, I know, shame on me for not capturing what could have been the supreme moment of this video. And there they go, twirling around in the nice and cozy warm water, laced with a bit of hydrogen peroxide. I put up a webcam to see the progress. Let's let the keys cook. One issue I immediately had was the keys getting stuck behind the Sous Vide stick and them occasionally pushing it over. After 2 hours or so I didn't really see any change, so I decided to try covering the pan with some plastic wrap, which I also would do if the water would be outside in the sun. Well, these are the results after I would say 4 hours of cooking and letting them stay in the slowly cooling water overnight. No improvements whatsoever, I would say. And well, that got me thinking, because of course it would be nice to have the keys twirl around like pasta. It is not the most efficient way to get them less yellow. When you take the pan and zoom in, you'll see that the keys are swirling around in quite a lot of water. And what do we need to have the keys swirl around in to become less yellow? Yes, indeed, peroxide. Where in this method, the actual amount of peroxide is probably not even passing 1%. And that got me thinking, what is the whole idea of using Sous Vide?
You're going to plug it into 130 degrees. Once it comes up to that temperature, which only takes a few minutes, you're going to just plunge it. That's it. You're now done.
You just put it in the water.
You put it in the water. So it's controlled.
I can do that.
It's in that controlled water.
Yes, cooking things in plastic bags slowly. That is why I thought it might work if I put the keys in a bag filled with 12% hydrogen, submerged in the water that is heated by the sous vide stick and will also heat the peroxide in the process. Much more effective than diluting an already small percentage of peroxide in a large amount of water. So I fished out all the keys and put them in a Ziploc bag. Must not forget the key that got stuck in the sous vide stick. I preheated the water to 60 degrees Celsius and set the timer for 2 hours and 1 minute. Oh, and good to mention is that I had my research team do some research, and most plastics used in keyboards can simply handle 60 degrees Celsius. Then I filled the Ziploc bag with the hydrogen peroxide. Was a bit difficult to find the right bag, but I hope that leaving some air will create space for the gases needed for the retrobrighting to form. So time to put in the bag and see what happens. The bag also moved about a bit, so I put some wire in the pot to keep it in place. Fast forward a bit and bubbles are forming in the bag, which looks promising. Well, after 4 hours I drained the water and the hydrogen. Rinse the keys and let them dry off. I have to say the results looks nice, although there is still some faint yellowing. I suspect these keys were always a bit off-white. Let's put them back on the actual keyboard. No need for pictures as I have an exact duplicate. A quick comparison to the other keyboard shows a quite nice result. Putting the keys back in is always a fun puzzle. Finishing with the B key. Nice. I have to say there's a nice improvement on the keyboard. Of course it would look even better with the whole plastic case retrobrighted, but that is for another day as we are focusing on the keys today. One thing that sort of annoyed me though is that with most keys, as they are exposed to UV light during their life being used as input devices for computers, shadows being cast by other keys will result in spots being less yellow than others. And then when retrobrighting them, these spots will become more white than the other areas of the key. But I feel that that is something that cannot be remedied. Also having this is better than the yellow keys that sometimes can look a bit gross. On the other Tulip keyboards you could clearly see the shadows being cast by the other keycaps. As on this side the yellowing is even, and on this side you can see the spots created by the shadows. I have to say that this experiment went quite as I hoped it would go, so I think it is time to try it on a computer. I think my Tandy 1000EX is a good candidate, as it has keys as yellow as badly looked after teeth. The computer boots up nicely and works very well. I got this a couple years ago and always wanted to retrobright the keys, but didn't because of the bad results I would get using other methods. The keys are nice to type on though. Case I will not retrobright as it's still a nice color. Probably not the exact color it was back in the 80s, but still looks presentable today. What I will retrobright in addition to the keys is the floppy door and latch, as those parts did suffer some yellowing. I'm lying when I say I didn't have some trouble opening the case of this computer. I went slowly though and referenced some videos to see if I could figure out how to open it. The issue was that 2 screws were hidden away inside the computer, that you would access by moving the door on top of the case and removing the expansion board. I find the connectors on this expansion board very interesting, by the way. So finding the screws allowed me to remove the top cover and more easily remove the keycaps. I'm a bit hesitant to remove keycaps these days, as more and more of my systems have gotten really brittle plastic. A key puller, which I also used here in addition with my hands, and a screwdriver proved to work. The screwdriver is not advisable, but the keys used on this computer had rather thick plastic. But maybe using some hot air will also help when plastics has gotten quite brittle. Wouldn't mind getting some suggestions on how you safely remove keycaps. Occasionally I would also pull out the stem, which was easily put back in. The spacebar also was removed easily. Then I got to the drive mechanism, took out the screws and removed the shield. Then turning it over and removing the screws that were holding the faceplate in place. I gave both parts a bit of a scrub, then moving on to the keys that were also rather grimy. Some alcohol cleaned them up nicely. Fast forward and the keys are in a bag and the water is already heated. Let's fill up the bag with some hydrogen peroxide. The lid of this jug was on so tight I had to use multiple tools to get it open. Some of the spillage in the bag too. Like the Tulip keys, I also tied some string this time to keep the bag in place. So let's have the keys cook for 3 hours or so at 60 degrees. So a couple hours have passed, I clamped the bag to the ribbon, and from this angle you can already see some improvements. So let's take it out. Well, have to say the results looks nice. I'll have the bag float around a bit in the still hot water as it will probably stay hot for a bit. I also took this opportunity to give the whole case a scrub. It really had some grime build up. So time to put the keys back in. Also, like the Tulip keys, there's still a hint of yellowish beige, but I think that these keys also never were fully white. I did stumble on a bit of an issue as the closing mechanism of my floppy drive didn't function anymore, as some parts appear to have broken. I have an idea now how I can fix it, but for the time being I will replace the drive with another one that works. One issue was that the floppy drive cable was very short and the connector of the new drive was in a different place, so I had to put in a larger cable. But the drive worked with the computer, which is the most important part. I had to cut the cable ties on the power supply cable to make it work, but the drive is installed and works nicely. I loaded up some MS-DOS software to test it out. Also gave me the opportunity to see if the Coco joysticks work with the 1000, which I didn't get to work, so I played Pac-Man with the keyboard. I think the Tandy 1000 looks much sleeker with the less yellow keys. So I have to say I will definitely be using my Sous Vide stick in the future to Retrobright keyboard keys, as this has proven to be much more easy and with effective results. As also the Tulip keyboard looks much better with the brightened up keys. Hopefully this also helps some other people looking for ways to get wider keys. Okay, so the first time I said thanks for watching was really low energy, so this is a seamless audio edit. Thanks for watching and good luck cooking your keys. Bye!